beneath the golden Colorado sunset, families scattered across its expanse, enjoying the warm summer evening. The tranquility shattered in an instant when angry voices cut through the air near the central pavilion. A young girl in a wheelchair, no more than 12, cowered as 5 men in black leather jackets surrounded her. Their faces were hard eyes cold beneath dark sunglasses despite the setting sun. The tallest among them, a muscular man with a snake tattoo climbing up his neck, knocked the girl's backpack from her lap with a deliberate swipe. "What's on this phone, little girl?" His voice carried across the park as he held up a pink smartphone. "Spying on us, were you?" A woman in her late 30s rushed forward, her white doctor's coat fluttering behind her. "Emily, leave my daughter alone." Her voice trembled with fear, but her stance was protective, positioning herself between the men and her child. The tattooed man's hand shot out, striking the woman across the face with enough force to knock her sideways. "You don't belong here," he snarled, looming over them both. In the distance, the rumble began, low at first, then rising to a thunderous growl, as 12 motorcycles appeared at the park entrance. Harley-Davidson's old models, meticulously maintained, formed a precise V formation as they rolled toward the confrontation. Silver-haired men in denim and leather, most in their 60s and 70s, faces weathered by time and experience, sat astride each machine. The lead rider brought his vintage 1985 Harley lowrider to a stop 20 feet from the scene. Dust settled around the formation as 12 kickstands descended in near-perfect unison. The leader, tall and imposing despite his 70 years, dismounted with the fluid grace of a much younger man. His silver hair was cut military short, his back ramrod straight, as he removed mirrored aviator sunglasses to reveal ice-blue eyes. Frank Reeves walked deliberately toward the group, his worn leather boots leaving distinct impressions in the soft earth. Without a word, he placed a weathered hand on the tattooed man's shoulder fingers, positioned with precise knowledge of pressure points. Frank's voice was quiet, yet carried across the suddenly silent park. "I believe you owe this young lady and her mother an apology." The tattooed man's sneer faltered as he looked into those steel blue eyes that had seen things most men couldn't imagine. In that moment, the park seemed frozen in time, the outcome hanging in the balance. The sun had barely crested the pine-covered mountains when Frank Reeves completed his 50th push-up on the weathered deck of his lakeside cabin. At 70, his morning routine remained unchanged from decades before: 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, and a mile run along the lake's edge. His body ached in protest, particularly his left knee damaged during a SEAL extraction mission in '89, but Frank ignored the pain, as he always had. Rising to his feet, he gazed across the still waters of Lake Riverdale. His reflection showed a man time had marked, but not broken, 6'2", with broad shoulders, silver hair cropped short in the same military style he'd worn since 1975, and a face lined with experience rather than mere age. The cabin behind him, built with his own hands 15 years ago upon retirement, stood as a testament to his self-reliance, simple, functional, and solid. Inside, Frank moved with economy and precision, brewing coffee in a battered percolator that had accompanied him through 3 decades of service. The cabin walls told his story in fragments, framed photographs of SEAL Team 6 in locations never to be named, commendations from operations still classified, in a shadow box containing his Navy Cross and Silver Star. Most visitors missed the hidden wall safe behind the vintage Route 66 metal sign containing his Colt 1911 .45, modified by Frank himself for enhanced accuracy, and the SEAL combat knife he'd carried since 1983. The radio played CCR's Fortunate Son as Frank, dressed in worn jeans, a faded blue work shirt, and his leather vest, bearing a single patch, a silver eagle with spread wings against a black background. The patch marked him as founder of the Silver Eagles, a motorcycle club comprised exclusively of aging veterans and former law enforcement officers. By 6:30 a.m., Frank was unlocking Second Chance Cycles, his garage specializing in vintage motorcycles and Harley-Davidsons. The shop occupied an old converted gas station on the outskirts of Riverdale, Colorado, population 3782. Inside, the walls displayed motorcycle parts, vintage advertising signs, and classic rock album covers. Led Zeppelin 4 held the place of honor behind the counter. Ray Donovan arrived at 700 a.m. sharp, as he had every morning for the past 8 years. At 68, the former Marine still moved with purpose, his massive forearms testament to both his military past and his present as Frank's lead mechanic. Morning, Frank, Ray said, hanging his leather jacket on the wall hook. The back bore the same silver Eagles patch as Frank's vest. Heard anything about those Denver boys causing trouble over in Pine Creek? Frank's expression hardened slightly. Sheriff Thompson called yesterday, said they were calling themselves Black Vipers, running some kind of distribution operation. 3 overdoses in Pine Creek last month. Ray whistled low. Getting closer. Too close. Frank replied, his mind already calculating possibilities. Contingencies, a habit from his days planning SEAL operations and later FBI hostage rescues. Think Parker's gonna do anything about it? Ray asked, referring to Riverdale's new sheriff Tom Parker, 35 years old with more administrative experience than street time. Frank's silence was answering enough. He tried mentoring the young sheriff, but Parker seemed more concerned with budgets and public relations than the approaching threat. The morning proceeded with the rhythmic sounds of wrenches on metal and the occasional rev of an engine being tested. Frank was deep in the disassembly of a 1978 shovelhead transmission when the familiar rumble of motorcycles announced the arrival of more Silver Eagles. Jim Doc Peterson parked his meticulously maintained 2005 Harley Road King beside Ray's bike. At 65, the former Army combat medic who'd served 2 tours in Iraq still carried himself with military bearing. Beside him, Mike Blackhorse, a Navajo former Army Ranger, dismounted from his custom-painted Harley Softail, the design incorporating subtle elements of his heritage. At 63, Mike remained the quietest of the group, but his tracking skills and outdoor knowledge had proven invaluable on countless hunting trips. The 4th arrival, Charlie Evans, rode up on his vintage Harley Electra Glide. At 72, the former county sheriff was the oldest Eagle, his full head of snow-white hair contrasting with his deeply tanned face. Got a call from Bill over at the hardware store, Charlie announced without preamble. Said he saw 3 bikes with Denver plates parked outside the Bluebird Diner this morning. Leather jackets with snake patches. Frank nodded, absorbing the information. Scouting, he said simply. The others nodded in understanding. This wasn't their first encounter with outlaw elements. Before Frank could continue, the sound of a struggling engine interrupted their conversation. A Ford F-150 pickup 2023 model limped into the parking lot, its engine making the distinctive sound of fuel injector issues. Frank recognized the problem immediately. The truck was unfamiliar, as was the woman behind the wheel, striking in her mid to late 30s, brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her face showing equal parts frustration and concern. In the passenger seat sat a young girl, perhaps 12, her wheelchair visible in the truck bed. Ray, take a look at Mrs. Jefferson's Sportster. The throttle's sticking again, Frank said, wiping his hands on a shop rag as he headed toward the truck. The woman was already climbing out her simple blouse and slacks, partially covered by a white doctor's coat. Is this second chance cycles? She asked, tension evident in her voice. My truck started acting up about 5 miles back. The GPS said this was the nearest garage. That's us, Frank replied, his tone professional but warm. Frank Reeves, owner. Dr. Catherine Mitchell, she responded, offering her hand. Kate, we just moved to Riverdale. I'm starting at the medical center next week. Her handshake was firm, confident, despite her predicament. Frank noted the absence of a wedding ring, the high-quality but not flashy watch, and the subtle signs of exhaustion around her eyes. Years of reading people in high-stress situations had made such observations second nature. Sounds like your fuel injectors, Frank said, moving toward the hood. Mind if I take a look? With the hood raised, Frank conducted a quick but thorough inspection, confirming his initial diagnosis. As he worked, the passenger door opened, and the young girl maneuvered herself into a wheelchair with practiced ease, though Frank noted the effort it took. Mom, can I look around? The girl called, her voice carrying the resilience of youth despite her circumstances. Kate glanced over with the protective look Frank had seen countless times in combat zones, the universal expression of a parent in an unfamiliar environment. Stay where I can see you, Emily. Frank continued his examination of the engine, explaining the issue to Kate in clear technical terms without talking down to her. Fuel injector's clogged. I can clean it out, have you back on the road in an hour. Beats waiting for a tow into town. That would be wonderful, Kate replied, relief evident in her voice. We're supposed to get the keys to our rental today. As Frank gathered his tools, he noticed Emily examining a vintage Indian Scout motorcycle displayed in the corner of the shop. That's a 1940 model, Frank said, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. Still runs like it did when it rolled off the line in Springfield, Massachusetts. Emily looked up, her eyes showing the same intelligence he'd noted in her mother's. Did you restore it yourself? I did. Frank nodded. Took 2 years to find all the original parts. It's beautiful, Emily said, running her hand along the leather seat. Frank noticed the careful way she used her arms to compensate for her non-responsive legs. You like motorcycles? He asked. I like machines, she replied with unexpected seriousness. Things that can be fixed when they break. The simple statement carried weight beyond her years, and Frank found himself nodding and understanding. Some things can always be fixed with enough knowledge, patience, and the right tools. Emily studied him with unexpected intensity. Were you in the military? You stand like my Uncle David, and he was in the Marines. Frank smiled slightly. Good observation. Navy, Special Forces. Like the SEALs. Her eyes widened. Exactly like that, Frank confirmed. Noting Kate watching their interaction from a few yards away, her expression a mix of protective concern and curious interest. Did you have a dog? Uncle David said some Special Forces guys had dogs. Frank leaned against the workbench. I did. Belgian Malinois named Rex. Smartest partner I ever had. Could find hidden explosives better than any machine ever made. For the next 45 minutes, as Frank repaired the truck's fuel injector, Emily peppered him with questions about military working dogs. Kate watched the exchange with growing relaxation, eventually joining the conversation. By the time Frank finished the repair, the initial tension had dissolved into something approaching comfortable familiarity. What do I owe you? Kate asked as Frank wiped his hands clean. Parts and labor. Call it $75, Frank replied. That seems very reasonable, Kate said, reaching for her purse. During their conversation at the garage, Frank noticed a distinctive scar on Kate's wrist as she reached for her purse, the type of mark he'd seen on medical personnel who had served in conflict zones. She caught his glance and subtly adjusted her sleeve, a practiced movement of someone accustomed to deflecting questions about their past. We're not in Denver anymore, Frank noted with a slight smile. Riverdale works differently. People help each other out. As Kate paid, Emily looked up at Frank with earnest eyes. Thank you for fixing our truck, Mr. Reeves. Frank, he corrected gently. And you're welcome, Emily. As they prepared to leave, Frank provided directions to their rental on Cedar Street, along with recommendations for the best grocery store and a warning about the occasional black bears that wandered into town during summer. If you need anything, the garage is open 6 days a week, Frank said as Kate started the now smoothly running engine. And the Silver Eagles meet for breakfast at the Bluebird Diner every Sunday. Best pancakes in Colorado. Kate's smile was genuine. Thank you, Frank, for everything. As the truck pulled away, Ray approached, wiping grease from his massive hands. Nice folks, he observed. Yes, Frank agreed, watching the truck disappear down the road. They are. Something about the encounter had triggered his protective instincts, a sensation he'd learned never to ignore during his years of service. Later that evening, with the garage closed for the day, Frank sat on his cabin porch, nursing a single glass of Maker's Mark bourbon as the sun set over the lake. His mind kept returning to Kate and Emily Mitchell, their recent arrival in town coinciding with the Black Viper's expansion into the area. Coincidence most likely, but Frank Reeves had stopped believing in coincidences somewhere in the Hindu Kush Mountains in the early 1990s. His phone buzzed with a text from Charlie Evans. 3 more bikes at the Red Roof Inn, same patches, getting bolder. Frank set down his bourbon and typed a response. Meeting tomorrow, my place, Booze 700. The evening air carried the scent of pine and the distant promise of rain as Frank mentally reviewed Riverdale's vulnerabilities. The town sat at a strategic crossroads between major highways. Its small police force consisted of Sheriff Parker and 3 deputies, and its location near the state border made it ideal for distribution operations. The math was simple and concerning. Sleep came in tactical increments, the habit of a man who'd spent decades in situations where deep sleep could mean death. At 0400, Frank was already awake, reviewing mental maps of the town, identifying defensive positions and potential trouble spots. By 0645, coffee was brewing as the first motorcycles rumbled up his gravel driveway. The Silver Eagles gathered around Frank's handcrafted oak dining table. Ray, Doc, Mike, Charlie, and 3 others who'd served with Frank in various capacities over the years. 8 men with over 2 centuries of combined military